Today in the bunker, we're going to build a hot dog stand suitable for the apocalypse. So for the basic structure of the building, we're going to use some black foam core, and I'm going to measure back from the edge just a bit and then cut that at roughly a 45-degree angle. You can kind of eyeball that. It doesn't have to be super precise, as long as you can fit the pieces together. And once that's done, then we'll take and we'll hot glue them. And I like to use the lines on the cutting mat to make sure everything is square. So we'll get that squared up. What will become our front window, or front wall rather, we're going to measure using a mini on its base to try and figure out how high we need to make our window. So if we go up about 40, that should be great. So we'll measure off the bottom and we'll mark that so we know it's the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to sketch that out and cut it out. We'll be right back. So the window is measured out. We're just going to cut it with a nice sharp hobby knife. I've already done an initial cut, then just go through and take 2, 3, 4 passes through there. That'll help cut down on the dragging and splitting and tearing and all that good stuff. I probably could have stood to use a sharper blade. And I could have stood to cut that a little straighter, but we'll fix it. Alright, so that's pretty good height. So we'll go ahead and get that glued up. And just make it fairly square. Alright, and there is our basic carcass of the building. So I'm going to go back and put some more glue inside just to strengthen that up. So we'll get that done and be right back. To dress up the outside a bit, I've got various bits and whatnot, including some pieces, old Necromunda pieces somebody gave me a very long time ago. At the time I didn't realize what they were. I would have tried to get more. We're just going to hot glue that on. I've got a piece I'm going to glue to the back side of this, and then we're going to build up a door inside there. So we'll get that all put together and be right back. Hot glued on, then we can begin building up this door. I think what I'm going to do is use some chipboard that I've cut, about a 2mm wide strip. I'm going to lay it on edge, and I will super glue this in here. So we'll see if we can make that go. Okay, that is not working. So we're going to cut some little strips to fit that. Actually, let's do this. So the problem is that keeps turning. There we go. If you can get it to lay in there flat, then that's the key. But then it wants to turn, and that sort of ruins the whole effect. There we go. We'll push that back into place. We'll kind of curve that around there. And then we'll trim off that excess. So that's not too bad. I think once it's painted, it'll look pretty good. So we'll add some more pieces to that. Just kind of cut these to fit. And there's no real right or wrong here. You just kind of put together what looks good. As much detail as you want to add. Alright, so we're going to continue doing that. We'll be right back. I've got our cross members added on there as kind of a outside buttressing on that door. I'm going to take a 1/16 inch hole punch and some cardstock, and I'm going to put some rivets on there. So let's cut those out and we'll be back. Pushed out a bunch of rivets out of the paper, or the cardstock, and I just took some PVA and I'm just going to apply that with a toothpick wherever we want to have a rivet. We'll just kind of dab that on there. I find a lot of times it's easier just to start from the middle and kind of work your way out. So we will continue to add those however you want them to be spaced. There's, again, no right or wrong answer here. Alright, so we're going to continue on with that and we'll be back. I find it best if, when you're applying the kind of corrugated siding, is to be mindful of where the overlaps are. Of course, you certainly could do it the other way if it's supposed to be really ramshackle. But I just attach this with some hot glue. And if you're careful, you could make it so that the corrugations line up, which will help making that a fairly low profile overlap. And so we're going to continue on around the rest of the building. To mix it up, you can add some flat panels of metal along with your corrugation. I've added that here. I put on some kind of strengthening pieces on the corners, and I'm adding some rivets. So you can kind of go nuts with this. Again, there's just no really right or wrong, so whatever you think looks cool, put it on there. Got the basic carcass covered, and I keep putting my fingers in this glue. So just add panels as you see fit. Put rivets on where you think they look good. We're going to go around and add some other little bits to it. And also we're going to build a roof. I went ahead and sealed the edges of that foam core. And we will build a service counter here at the front. So let's get started with that. We're going to use some chipboard and cut out and glue into that space. First thing I'm going to do is add some pieces on the side. I cut this 5 millimeters wide out of some chipboard, so it's the same width as the foam core. We're going to cut that to fit and just glue that into place. We'll just add a little PVA and put that piece into place. Wipe off our excess. And we'll just go around and do that. I generally do the sides first, then I'll do a top piece, and then that bottom. So we'll continue on. Serving window is done. I just added a piece of chipboard and a piece of corrugated at the top, and then of course the chipboard on the sides. Just glued that in place. I glued this with hot glue just so it would set up quick. The rest of it I just glued with white glue, PVA. So we will add some other bits on here as we go, and we still got to make a roof, so we'll be back. Alright, the building needed a roof, so I went ahead and put one together and gave it the same treatment that I did the walls. I added pieces of various cardboards and whatnot, and then textured it with some rivets. And I happen to have a 3D printed piece I had printed back when I did the water pump building. So I put that on there with some hot glue. And around the sides I also added some various bits that I had with hot glue. This is a piece of sprue right here, and some super glue. So we're going to let that dry. And for the roof, we just used some foam core. Around the edges I just took some chipboard that I cut into 5 millimeter strips and hot glued that down, and then just glued on some rivets with some PVA, just our 1/16 hole punch rivets. And once this dries well, then we will prime it and get ready to paint it. Got this primed. It kind of ties the whole piece together. And let's set about putting some paint on it. This will, let's get that out of the way. This will mostly be kind of our general rusty metal corroded kind of finish. We'll throw a little bit of color on there. So let's get started. Do this pretty much the same way I did the, or I'm doing the rest of the Underhive and derelicts, deadbolts derelict rather, using the raw sienna over black. And then we'll dry brush it with some silver. This will also add some color in some places. Just to kind of simulate the scrappy nature of how this is constructed. So we'll just kind of overbrush that on there. And it's sort of, you know, to taste. There's no real right or wrong there. It just depends on how rusty you want everything to be. You can also stipple it. That'll help build up a texture. Takes a little longer, but again, no wrong answer. So we'll do the sides too. Continue on with that, and we'll be back. With the base coat of the raw sienna applied pretty generously around the entire building, we're going to let that dry, and then we'll dry brush that with some silver. Alright, that's given us a nice rusty base coat. So we will start dry brushing some silver. We're just going to use some old craft silver. So we're going to do just like we did on the other terrain, or the deadbolts, derelict, all that stuff. We're just going to kind of dry brush some silver on. And again, this is to taste. Just do it till it looks how you want it to look. And the biggest thing is trying to catch the edges. Anywhere there's a nice crisp edge, you want to hit with that silver and accentuate that there's an edge there. Now that we've dry brushed silver all over that, it gives it a very rusty metal appearance. So now we're going to go back and add a little bit of color and some detail, just in a few places, just to kind of break up the sort of monochrome metal appearance that it currently has. To really get the feel of chipped paint, I like to use a sponge, and you can use like these makeup sponges or any other kind of sponge, foam packing from miniatures, whatever kind of sponges you happen to have, and you can just take and kind of stipple that on with the sponge. And if it's a little too much, you can turn the sponge around and sort of knock it back. That gives it a very chipped, worn appearance. So just take some colors that you like and put them here and there, wherever you think the model needs it, and we'll be back. I added some green and some blue here and there, and then picked out a few little details. I don't know if you can see that on the various bits. And now, I basically wanted you to see this before I attempt to paint the signage. I'm going to use this yellow paint pen, and we're going to try and make a sign there. Normally I would make something maybe a little less perilous, but what the heck. I tried to kind of sketch it out to see where that's going to be. Alright, so let's give it a shot. That's not too bad, I think. So we'll let that dry. Also made, oh, here we go. I took a piece of index card and a Sharpie and just made myself a menu. And once that's all dry, because I don't want to hose it up, I'm going to glue this on and we'll attach that for some extra detail. So we'll be right back. So I took the menu and smeared the PVA on the back. I'm going to try and very carefully add that to the building. Put that right there. We're going to let that dry. Once that dries, I'm going to put some PVA on the front, and then I'll probably dirty it up a little bit. So we'll be back. And with our signage added, our menu, we've dirtied up a little bit. Our various bits that we've glued on, the details that we've picked out. It makes a pretty good hot dog stand, I think. So whenever you're in the Underhive or out in the Wasteland and you want a hot dog, go to Shorty's. It's all about the girth. Alright guys, well hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell, do all the stuff they tell us to tell you. Hopefully that I have earned a subscription from you, and if not, then put it in the comments, what can I do to make these better? So, in the meantime, build yourself a hot dog stand, have a delicious hot dog, and a fantastic day.